Welcome, colleagues, and you are at the right place. This is our part 2 of the tracer study findings, and we are tracking beneficiaries over, reporting on the tracking of beneficiaries over a 3-year study. For some of you who were with us during part 1, where we are giving feedback on the results on the tracking of enterprise development beneficiaries. So this morning we'll be particularly focusing on support for work seekers. And I welcome everyone in the room. Just a few house rules. You will remain muted, colleagues, without your camera. Please we ask that you post all your questions and your comments in the chat, and my colleagues will get in there and we'll be doing feedback on some of them. Some of the questions will also have a Q&A section at the end of the segment. And we'll make sure that as well we do post links to where you can access the presentation and some of the material that comes from this study. In particular, we will be sharing the good practice guideline that our colleagues from JET have helped us put together. So that will all be communicated by Lerato in the chat, and she will also let us know when we can access the slide material at the end of the workshop. So without much waste of time, I welcome everybody to part 2 of this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Colleagues, just before we do an introduction, I'm going to call the DDG later on to welcome everyone. I would just like to do a quick poll. We just have 2 polls, just to find out who is in the room. And we're not using Menti this time. You can actually press the little viewpoint that will allow you to be able to put your name and be able to vote. Just tell us who you are. I see my colleagues have started with the second poll. It's fine. So who is in the room? And then we'll do a second one on reflecting on SA's current work seekers program. Just give us an indication, colleagues, are you from the private sector? Some of our colleagues in the public sector. From the private sector, the NGOs as well. I see, Nuku, you've raised your hand. We are not taking any hands at this point, Nuku. Kindly, please do post your chat or your comments or anything that you have in the chat box there, and we will be able to respond. Please remember, you are not muted. You are unmuted as you enter the room. We will be taking chat comments and questions in the sidebar. How are the results looking? Has everybody been able to vote? Who is in the room? And also reflecting on the current state of supporting work seekers in the country. What are your thoughts on that? I think this would be a good kickstart to some of the conversations that we're going to have today. To help us pick brains on exactly, are we doing enough? Or maybe a more important question is what we are doing working. Catherine Lerato, can we see the first results? Who is in the room? Okay. We have 55% of our colleagues from the public sector who have joined us. We have about 30% from the NGOs. Welcome, colleagues. And voting on the work seeker programs. What are your thoughts on that? Are we doing enough? See, we have this very large group that is neutral. We do hope by the end of the presentation, the neutral either disagree or very much strongly agree. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you for voting. We will have more of these votes as well in the Q&A session at the end of the presentation, where we are coming reflecting on what has been shared. Without much waste of time, I'd like to call Nadia to do the welcome and to do the intro and welcome everyone to today's webinar. Nadia is the DDG for Employment Facilitation, and she's also the head of the Jobs Fund. Nadia, over to you.
Thank you, Mo, and good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us this morning. There's so much happening in our country. So many things that we can be really angry about. So many things that it is so important that we speak up about. And so from the Jobs Fund perspective, we really appreciate that you're making the time to be here with us this morning. So a very warm welcome to all the participants, a very warm welcome to our partners from Jet Education Services. We're joined by Natalie, Monica and Daniel this morning. Also a very warm welcome to Fiona, one of our Jobs Fund project partners at Capacity. As Mo has said, this is the second part in a series. We would like to share with you the outcome of the work that the Jobs Fund has done together with their partners. And of course, we are hoping that today's session is of benefit and that it will provide all of you with some further insights on how we can better design and strengthen our support for the unemployed and for youth in particular. And in respect of youth, of course, we hope that that support for youth that it supports them in whatever way it is necessary, whether the young person chooses employment, whether they choose entrepreneurship, whether they choose further education. I think that it is important that as participants in this particular ecosystem that we design interventions that are appropriate, that we hope that you also appreciate that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. But without saying anything further, I look forward to this engagement. I look forward to the questions that is going to be posted. I think this is an amazing opportunity in that it's not always that we come together in a forum like this to share what we have learned, and with the primary intent and objective of strengthening the many, many programs and the much good work that is being done across South Africa to support the unemployed. Thank you, Mo, and over to you.
Nadia, thank you very much. Colleagues, I'll be doing a framing of the background to the study, which we started in 2017. As a challenge fund, we are acutely obsessed about not just development finance that produces output, but we are concerned with creating impact beyond grant funding, beyond just numbers. Of course, it's good to brag that over the past few years, we have financed over 146 projects. We've given about 8.49 billion in grant funding. We've also leveraged about 32.2 billion funding from our partners. That is quite a staggering amount. But as we are approaching a decade since our establishment, we wanted to look deeper and reflect on the meaning of these numbers. So when in 2017, we were challenged by the DDG herself, that government needs to look beyond outcome and output indicators. We need to look and think about development beyond merely numbers. We need to investigate the meaning behind the numbers, especially as they relate to our beneficiaries. We wanted to determine what are the long-term benefits that have accrued as a result of our involvement. But more so, we wanted to ask ourselves a question. Would the results still be there when the grant funding ends? What the TASER study has allowed us to do is to hear not only from the partners, but the actual beneficiaries themselves. To just not do a fancy report and file it away, but to really track the meaning of the results that are happening on the ground. So these past 3 years, it has given us an opportunity to really dig deeper and reflect on the meaning of the numbers that we are reporting. We were also fortunate that during this time, the study happened across or during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this was very interesting for us because it allowed us to gather first-hand data on the experiences of our beneficiaries during this period. But most of all, it gave us an opportunity to check in and understand what exactly they're going through. Nadia, you were right. Once again, that after achieving results, it's not enough to just rest on our laurels. We need to also ask ourselves, what next? What then? What do the numbers mean? We're really fortunate that we got an opportunity to understand and have an opportunity to really reflect on what works, what doesn't, and how to design better programs. But above all, it makes us responsive to the needs of our partners, to the needs of our beneficiaries, but to also ask ourselves, are we doing development the right way? At the end of the study, we had a whole lot to really reflect on about the kind of interventions that we are implementing and the kind of results that we want to see. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to pick brains with us this morning as we share the second part of the TRACER study focusing on supporting work seekers. Our colleagues at JET have been working with us to frame this journey, and now here we are, about 4.5 years later. We hope you will be challenged as much as we were, you will be enlightened, and you will experience many and a few aha moments. But above all, we hope that you leave with some thoughts and insights about how we can design and implement programs that have sustainable impact, that go beyond the life of projects, and that go beyond grant funding. Without much waste of time, I would like to welcome our colleagues from JET who will take us through the findings. Natalie, Monica, and Daniel. Natalie is the COO of JET, and Natalie is responsible for operations at JET Education Services. Monica has been leading the support for Workseeker study in the TRACER journey, and Daniel is the senior statistician, is the senior statistician at JET Services. Colleagues, I welcome you on board. We look forward to a thoughtful morning. Over to you. Are you ready, Natalie?
May you please unmute Natalie?
Or she's muted. The colleagues will help her quickly. Colleagues, don't forget to be sending and questions in the type box. Any comments and feedback will also be shared there. Lerato will continue to update us about where we can access the presentation at the end today and where we can access the full report, the summary report, and the good practice guideline that has been prepared.
Thanks, Mo. Good morning. I'm Natalie Marie, and you will see that I'm in transit. I'm in Limpopo, and it's very different to our usual Joburg-based offices. And I think it's also quite timely in terms of my trip to reflect on job seekers and what our youth have to deal with and are exposed to on a daily basis. But apologies for the background, but I'm here. And welcome to everyone here. I think I want to start off to say thank you to the Jobs Fund for working with JET on this very important study. And my colleagues Monica and Daniel will take you through the details. I think when we just start to frame this conversation, you've all seen the study and you've seen the findings, you've seen the recommendations. What we need to stress is that context is important. Context is critically important when we do development work. So as funders, as development workers, as practitioners, politicians, we always want to measure impact and look at what are the results, what are the outcomes. We need to be quite careful when we consider the context. Whilst I'm here in Limpopo, we started off in Mokopane, and this morning we drove to Burgersfort. And there's massive unemployment. And driving through the area, seeing the mining communities, looking at the demographics, the geography of what the youth needs to navigate on a daily basis to go and find jobs, you basically think, how do we create better access? How do we upscale our transport system to make sure that people can actually get around, get out of where the villages are and get to Polokwane or get to a bigger town or city? So in terms of this study, apply your mind in terms of moving outside of where we work as policymakers and putting yourself in the shoes of these youth work-seeking people that we need to service. In terms of the career pathways, the study will give a good sense of where are the entry points, what is a basic package of support that can be provided, and what is it that we can anticipate doing. But at the end of the day, what we need to remember is that longevity and a longitudinal approach when we do development is critically important. The other thing that Mo and Najwa spoke to already is around partnerships. How do we build these partnerships, leverage these partnerships, and of course anticipate that these partnerships will change depending on where you're at with the development. And finally, entities such as the Jobs Fund and the partnerships that they have on board, they constantly need to drive the innovation edge and push the boundaries about what we say, what we promote, and how we get entities, private sector, public sector, small, medium business, the thinking, how do we extend that thinking to make sure that we can have a fit for purpose solution for most of our youth going forward. Development work is not an easy fix. It's difficult and we need to have grit around this. And that studies such as the Jobs Fund, we're really looking forward to be invested in knowing better in finding the solutions to service our youth. So on that note, I'll hand over to Monica and Daniel and enjoy the presentation. Thanks.
May I please have the next slide? Morning, colleagues. So Daniel and I will take you through the findings of the TRACER study, which happened over 3 years. So when I talk about wave 1, I'll be referring to year 1 of the study, and wave 2 is year 2 of the study, and year 3 is wave 3. So the study happened between 2019 to 2021, and the main method of data collection was a survey. So 5 projects were selected, which we referred to as FW1 to SW5 in our presentation. And in 2019, wave 1, we had 2,080 respondents. But as the study went along, there was researcher fatigue, which is to be expected, a challenge of tracer studies. And by year 3, we had lost 44.3%. And it varied in terms of project, the attrition. But we'll talk more about the patterns and what causes the attrition. So we were concerned that our study may not be representative, but we looked at other studies and found out that it's actually quite common to have people dropping out. And what we did was that in wave 3 in 2021, when we were analyzing the results, we matched the first survey with the final survey. So our results, when we report, even when we make cross-references to wave 1 and wave 2, are based on the 1,159 respondents who were surveyed at wave 3 in 2021. So in addition to the survey, we also had 50 interviews in the 3 years. We interviewed job fund partners, we interviewed beneficiaries. So in the first year, we only interviewed 5 beneficiaries, but in year 2, we decided that there would be value in having some detailed case studies. So we selected 4 projects that we focused on. So we had SFW2 respondents, we had SFW3 respondents for a survey. So those were the 2 SFW. And we also had 2 case studies from the ED. So those of you who attended the first presentation, the first webinar, we presented on the ED, but today it's for the SFW. So we have some information from interviews from those respondents. Next slide, please. So Daniel will take you through the analysis and then we'll present the findings.
Thanks, Monica, and also thanks to Natalie. It's good that I always get the easy stuff, you know. So in this study, we looked at 3 parts of analysis. The first one being the descriptives, and the second one being the thematic analysis, and then the third one being the propensity score matching. So as you know, the descriptive statistics is the normal averages, you know, the mean, the mode, and the ranking. Analysis, we speak about the patterns, identifying patterns using the qualitative data. And then the propensity score matching is the one that I'm going to zoom in now, because I'm going to tell you why and when are we supposed to do the propensity score matching. So propensity score matching, its aim is to compare 2 groups of beneficiaries, especially when you're speaking about the national data as compared to the study that you are running. And we see that we use the estimates. Most of the time we use demographic data to calculate the estimate so that we can make sure that the people that we are comparing with are of similar backgrounds. And then in this study, what we did is that we used the quarterly labor force, that is the survey that is run by the Stats SA, and then also we used it to compare with the SFW project beneficiaries. In the whole report, we took the data from the quarterly labor force of 2019 Q2, the quarterly labor force of 2020 and 2021 in order to match the support for work seeker of wave 1, that is year 1, and then up to wave 3, that is year 3. And then we used the employment outcome, which is a binary variable of 0 meaning unemployed and 1 meaning employed. And then, as I said, that we use the demographic variables like gender, education qualification, age, and province of residential in order to calculate this estimate of the propensity score that will help us to create a comparison group that is similar to the SFW study. Next slide, please. When we do the propensity score matching, we established, you know, this SFW respondents who we want to calculate how likely or how less likely are our beneficiaries going to be able to find employment or not, as compared to the people that are similar to them that were surveyed nationally. And then for the employed variable, what we did is that everyone who said they were employed and everyone who said whether they were in a learnership or they were also running a business, we categorized all of those people as employed. And the ones that said they were unemployed and then they are also studying, we categorized them as unemployed. And then to calculate this estimate of propensity score matching, we used a software called Stata of Vision 16. And we also used our demographic characteristics like gender, education. And to compare those, we ran a test statistics called chi-square. The chi-square is the one that it's going to tell us the association of our variables, which are demographics, and the employment status of the respondents. this is going to tell us how likely or how less likely are the people going to get employed. Next slide.
So just a little bit about the project. We selected 5 projects to explore for the tracer study, and 3 of them were sector specific. So SFW1 was the call center industry, SFW2 ICT industry, and SFW5 was the automotive industry. SFW3 and SFW4 were supporting general employment, with SFW3 focusing specifically on the employment of people with disabilities. And SFW4 was focusing on employment in all sectors. So I would like to draw you to some important aspects about this project in terms of being responsive to the employment of young people. So SFW1 and SFW4 were recruiting young people without a matric. So if you had at least grade 10 for SFW1 and at least grade 11 for SFW4, you could be recruited to the project. And this is really important. Our experts pointed out that sometimes when people advertise for jobs or for projects, there's always this emphasis on matric, yet not all jobs or not all interventions require a matric. So in terms of being responsive, this is quite critical, and especially looking at the fact that these young people would be skilled and placed in jobs, and there would be assistance in finding work with other employer partners if the partner didn't place them. SFW2 was recruiting graduates as well, responding to graduate unemployment, and it was based on an internship model together with SFW5. And most of these internships converted to permanent employment, which was really important. So in terms of the SFW3 and SFW4, the general employment support, these are the only projects that were successful in recruiting beneficiaries with disabilities. We'll talk about that later when we talk about how the other projects fared in employing people with disabilities. But I think an important aspect also in this selection and targeting is that there were some opportunities missed as young people take up opportunities when they see an opportunity like this. At the end of the survey, which was based on an interview, we were asking beneficiaries if they had any comments to make. And some of them, many actually indicated that they were actually ended up participating in this opportunity, but that's not what they wanted. They actually wanted support to further their education. So they were looking for funding, but they saw a call for application and they applied. So we thought there were opportunities missed there in terms of placement, because someone who could have been directed to the right channel to find what they were looking for ended up in a project that they were not really interested in. Well, some people may convert that opportunity and make it positive for them, while some people are quite stuck. And once they are convinced that they want to further their studies, they don't open up to an opportunity like that and turn it into something positive. So in that regard, it becomes a wasted opportunity and a wasted investment, because someone who got trained and was not really into that opportunity, and someone else missed on the opportunity. Next slide, please. So in addition to the information from the survey itself, from the 1,159 respondents, we also drew on information from the Jobs Fund Grant Management System, the GMS. which is important information because it gives a broader view of all the beneficiaries. It doesn't only cover the survey respondents, but for the project, the entire achievement. And as you can see here, in terms of job placement, the projects did very well. Most of them exceeded targets in terms of creating permanent employment in short-term jobs. Where it says NT, it means there was no target for that particular indicator. I think what's also important, if you look at the last two columns, they show you that when we started the tracer study in 2019, some of the projects had already concluded. So you have SFW1, which had ended in 2018, and 2, which had ended in 2017, and SFW3 had ended 3 years before. So this is important in terms of interpretation of the results, because if a project had already finished 3 years before, when we started the tracer study, it can give you some information about the sustainability, especially if you look at SFW3, which exceeded targets in short-term jobs and was very close to achieving the target in placement with project partners in permanent jobs. So when I share the tracer study results, you'll be able to refer back to understand whether the jobs created were sustainable or not. Next slide, please. So when we started the tracer study, we wanted to find out where the respondents were, because that's essentially what a tracer study is about. So we wanted to find out what they were doing at the time of wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. And this slide here shows that at the time of wave 3, 44% were employed. Unemployment was slightly higher at 44.2%. And then 5% were studying, 4% were self-employed or they owned a business, and then 3% were in a learnership. So just to say a bit about this is, when we spoke to the case study beneficiaries, we found out that some people went to study because they couldn't find employment. And then some people said they started owning a business. They started a business because they couldn't find employment, which is not a positive trend, because there seems to be a binary relationship between employment and a business. So I'll start my business when I can't find a job. But we actually had positive instances of employed beneficiaries who were planning to start their businesses. So a business can be owned by people who are employed. And in relation to this business statistics, we read an OECD study which indicated that compared to other similar income countries, South Africa's self-employment rate is very low. Like other comparable countries, they have a self-employment rate of about 30% compared to South Africa's low one. And if you think about it, if 30% of the people became self-employed, that would really decrease the unemployment rate in the country. Another comment about learnerships. So learnerships are being used also by some young people as an alternative or an escape from unemployment. When we did the case study interviews, we came across 3 young people who were in their 3rd learnership. So there's a revolving door where someone moves from learnership to learnership just to stay unemployed. But I think a positive finding from the employment and unemployment in wave 3 was that compared to data from Stats SA, the unemployment rate for the support for Workseekers program respondents was slightly lower, which is very positive. If we look at quarter 2 and quarter 3, when we did the tracer study for wave 3. Next slide, please. Daniel will take you through the significance of the employment data for the SFW beneficiaries by explaining the propensity score matching result.
Thanks, Monica. Just to reflect to what we were speaking about right now on the previous slides, you know, quarterly labor force is an open source. Everyone can go and read about, you know, the results. And just to make you aware on the propensity score matching, the results of the quarterly labor force wouldn't be the same as the one that we are having. The reason being, as I've explained when I was zooming into the propensity score matching, is because here we are only taking the respondents that are having the similar backgrounds, the similar demographic backgrounds with the SFW, with the support for work seekers. It's not the full survey of the quarterly labor force, only those that are having similar background as the support for work seekers. And then also on the previous slide that Monica was showing, she was showing the full variable of the employment status, including you know, those who are having a business, those who are in a learnership. And then also remember, as I said, we for the purpose of the propensity score matching, we made that variable binary, a 0-1 variable, unemployed, employed. And then the results will show us how likely or how less likely is it for our support for work seeker beneficiary to get a job or not. So going into the result, we started with gender. So in both the support for work seekers and the quarterly labor force, gender was significantly associated with the employment status. This we see it by the PR value, that is the probability value of if that number there is less than 0.05, meaning at 95% confidence. If that number is less than 0.05, then we say it is significant. So gender in both tables of the SFW and the quarterly labor force, we see that it's significant. It's significantly associated with the employment status. And then you can also see on the percentage column that in both of the survey, male respondents are more likely to get an employment than the females in both of the SFW and the quarterly labor force. But the important part here is, however, the support for work seekers, all gender, male, female, they were more likely to get employed than their similar counterpart in the quarterly labor force. You can see, for example, females there in the SFW, it's 48%, and then in the quarterly labor force is 34.8%. And that is a huge difference. Can we go to the next slide, please? And then we go and check the age. And the age, we categorize it as the youth and also as the adults, from 15 to 34, and then also from 35 plus. And then this category is also being used by Status A to differentiate between youth and more adult people. And then similarly to what happens to gender, age group is it's a significant association variable of employment status in both of the SFW and the quarterly labor force. We see that by the p-value being less than 0.05. And then in the support for work seeker survey, the youth were more likely to be employed compared to adults. You can see that for SFW survey, the youth were at 52.8%, and then the adults were at 40.6%. And I think that is one of the indicators that Jobs Fund was looking at, that, you know, we need to deal with the youth unemployment. But you can see that everyone who were in most of the youth that were in the Jobs Fund support for work seeker program, they were more likely to get an employment than their adults. But however, conversely, for the national data, which is the quarterly labor force survey, adults were more likely to get an employment than their youth. And then as we compare support for work seekers and quarterly labor force, we can see that the youth of the support for work seekers were more likely to get employed than their counterparts in the quarterly labor force survey. 52.8 against 31.4%. So next slide, please. When we go to education, so education, we found similar results as the age group and also the gender. And I think it's something that was expected. You know, most of the time you find that people are saying, no, without education, you can still, you know, but statistically, it is proven that education is a significant association variable for employment status in both the SFW and the quarterly labor force. And then in the quarterly labor force and the support for work seekers, the graduates, the people who further their studies than tertiary level, like, you know, the ones with the degrees, the honors, they were more likely to get employed than those with less than the graduate qualification. Those with matrix, those with less than matrix couldn't find more work as compared to the graduates. But however, the SFW respondents with any qualification or like graduates or other tertiary, they were more likely to get employed than their similar counterparts of the quarterly labor force. But zooming on qualification on graduates, you can see that for SFW, you have 73.5% of graduate getting employment than compared to the 60.1 graduate in the quarterly labor force that are getting into employment. Next slide, please. And then going into the province of residential. So just as a footnote or as a limitation, I've highlighted the support for work seeker provinces. There were 4 provinces. Those that are in red, they are the ones that were having small samples. You know, for example, we had Free State with 16 respondents. So it's sort of like difficult to draw a conclusion with small samples. So that's why we ended up treating them with caution to say that for the purpose of the propensity score matching, we are just going to treat them as the provinces with small sample sizes, and then we can continue to look at other provinces. But in all the surveys, support for work seekers and quarterly labor force survey, province was significantly associated with employment status. The p-value is less than 0.05. But in SFW, respondents who were from Eastern Cape were more likely to be employed. And then that is followed by Western Cape and Gauteng. And as for the quarterly labor force, respondents that were in Western Cape were more likely to get employed. And then that is followed by Gauteng and Free State. However, respondents in the 4 provinces that we were talking about, the one without the red font, out of 5, so we are only looking at the 5 provinces. All of them, the 4 provinces in the SFW survey, they were more likely to get employed than the similar provinces in the support in the quarterly labor force. Next slide, please, Monica.
Thank you, Daniel. So in addition to looking at employment outcomes overall, we were also interested in looking at the employment outcomes per project. And at the bottom there where the N is, it shows you the number of respondents for each project. So as you can see, it varies quite significantly with the projects with the general support for work seekers tending to have more. So I would like to draw your attention to the employed, the orange bars for SFW2 and SFW5, which had the highest proportion of respondents employed at wave 3. Remember, I said these ones were sector specific, ICT and automotive industry. So the employment outcomes were very good. And then also drawing your attention to the maroon bars, which show respondents who were unemployed, and they were highest for SFW3 and SFW4. Next slide, please. So it was important for us to look at employment over time. And this slide also looks at employment over time, 6 months before participating in the SFW project, 6 months after, as well as year 1 to 3. And as you can see, I also highlighted there in red border, SFW2 and SFW5. Unlike other projects where characteristically 6 months after the Jobs Fund project, there was a spike in people accessing jobs. But there were fluctuations with other projects, but for SFW2 and 5, jobs access consistently went up, even during the bad times that Natalie talked about. COVID didn't seem to affect the project that much because employment was maintained. But for SFW3, you can see that the employment went up, was consistent in year 1, but then it went down and up again. Next slide, please. Similarly with unemployment, I mean, SFW2 had the lowest, the highest unemployment rate. But what's important to note about unemployment is if you look at 6 months before, where employment was very high, even at wave 3, even with the economic challenges, it's significant that unemployment never reverted to as high as it was 6 months before the Jobs Fund project. And we think that is a real achievement in terms of sustainability of jobs. Next slide, please. So when people are employed, it matters what kind of contracts they have. And we wanted to find out the proportion of people who had permanent contracts. And if you look at the total bar, it looks, it shows that over 80% of people in wave 3 had permanent employment contracts. And some really positive finding was that over 90% of the contracts were with the companies that the beneficiaries were working for. And we emphasize this because in wave 1, there was a disturbing trend for SFW1, where about 33%, a third of the contracts were with labor brokers. And in wave 2, that had reduced to 14%, where employment contracts were with labor brokers. And that actually reduced the income for SFW1 respondents. But at wave 3, it had significantly improved, which was quite positive. Next slide, please. So significantly, what's important is impact in terms of when people are employed or unemployed. And one of the issues we wanted to explore was, how have these Jobs Fund projects changed your life? And for us, the issue of agency was really important, especially with regards to networks, because usually the literature says that work seeking is very difficult for people from previously disadvantaged communities because they don't have networks who refer them to jobs. So it was positive that when these young people were in jobs, they were telling us that they were able to help family members and friends get jobs. Some of the projects that they were in were incentivized them to refer other people. We had in the case studies, young people saying they referred people from their village to the SFW2 project, and they also benefited. So the help that was given was helping with CVs, helping with referrals, giving CVs to employers for them to access jobs. So there's a multiplier effect when young people get into jobs where they assist other people and they help their families to support their families and siblings And we found this really important. And over time, 40% of respondents in wave 3 were supporting family and friends to get jobs. Next slide, please. So finally, we wanted to find out what the value for money for the projects were. And we didn't want to thumb suck. So we developed a matrix, which we hope other people will further develop, to try and find different indicators to evaluate the value for money. And this pertained to cost effectiveness. So we explored through a rigorous cost-effective analysis how much each job created cost. And there was a five-point scale where we use average per capita, GDP per capita per job, to say if it's lower than, cost per job is lower than GDP per capita, which at inflation adjusted prices in wave 3 was 83,844, then it's very cost effective. And as you can see in the table, 4 of the projects were regarded as very cost effective. So if a project is expensive, it's not cost effective, it would be over 3 times the average GDP per capita. And even the most expensive project, SFW5, was lower than that. So the projects were cost effective. So we also looked at permanent contracts, which project had permanent contracts, a certain proportion, and they all scored 5 out of 5. And for permanent jobs realized, they also scored adequately, which is 3, to the excellent 5. And then we looked at employment rate at the 2021 survey, wave 3. So we judged the project according to the national employment rate, and SFW3 fared very poorly. And SFW3, although in the early slides where I showed you that they met or exceeded their target, the jobs were not sustainable, because by the time of wave 3, a lot of the young people had lost their jobs. So we also inquired about job satisfaction to find out if they were happy in their jobs, if they had opportunities to grow, and most projects fared well, adequate. People were saying they were generally okay. They would stay at their job. So we looked at all the indicators, and because they had 5 criteria, we multiplied the number of indicators that by the criteria. So if a project was excellent, it would have to score 30 points, and then poor, it would have to score 6 to 17 points. And as you can see, most of them were good. 3 out of the 5 projects, they scored 24 to 29 points in terms of value for money. And the other 2 projects were adequate. They were on the upper end of adequate with 23 points. We'll take you through the recommendations now. I'll hand back to Daniel.
Thanks, Monica. So in the first one, the first recommendation, it is linked to what I was presenting on in the propensity score matching. And we've seen that the inferentials stated that, you know, the support for work seekers respondents were more likely to get employed than their similar counterparts of the quarterly labor forces. And we've seen that almost half, I mean, just above half, like 50% to 51% of the support for work seekers respondents were able to get employment than the 37 to 38% of the quarterly labor force survey. And then we've zoomed in also in the youth. That is the most important part of the project. You know, seeing that the use of the support for work seekers were more likely to be employed than their peers in the quarterly labor force. Hence, as a recommendation, we are saying that targeting the youth should be a condition in all the projects to address the youth unemployment. Secondly, we are going to talk about the people with disability. Just like what happened in the enterprise development, where we couldn't find the suitable data to do this kind of comparison that we did for the SFW. It is very difficult to find data set on the nationally on the people with disability. Hence, if we improve this and have this database on check, it will help us to benchmark employment of people with disability. Hence, the interventions that we can do in the jobs fund level, they should include that all the projects should be targeting for improving participation of people with disabilities. Remote learning opportunity should increase for people with disability where possible. And also the partnership, the transversal partnerships are required for employment of people with disability so that they can have support in terms of labor law and health and transport. We can also give incentives for employers that are employing people with disability for a longer time. And also we can also check if they have the competitive salaries and benefits for those job retention for people with disability. We can also look at revision of the BBBEE code. I'll take back to Monica.
Thanks, Daniel. So in the survey, there was a lower response rate of people who were participating in the SFW project compared to the ED project. ED is enterprise development. And one of the reasons was the shorter support provided to SFW respondents. The ED projects tended to be longer and the support was longer. So when we actually got to the SFW respondents, especially those who were unemployed, they didn't think they had to participate in the study because they actually hadn't benefited, which was problematic in terms of their understanding of the benefit. So we recommend that because of this, beneficiaries need to be supported for a longer period and referred to opportunities where they can get help for a longer period, but also need to be empowered to win themselves off of government support eventually, so that they can get support within their networks. Although, I mean, we make this recommendation, understanding how difficult it is for young people looking for work. I spoke earlier about the binary perception of business and employment. And that was noticeable in the project as well, the SFW and ED project. We recommend that integration between the ED and SFW project within and across funding windows would be beneficial so that beneficiaries can be referred across projects. For example, those with a business interest who are in SFW projects would have been referred to ED projects and vice versa. This would also have worked particularly with employment of people with disabilities, because there was a whole project focusing on that, and yet the outcomes in terms of selection and targeting by the other project for people with disabilities was not very good. So given the success rate experienced by SFW 2 and 5, which were niche specific, we recommend that government projects consider supporting more partners that provide niche training for specific sectors. Final slide, please. Oh, not final, next one. So the importance of recruiting people without a matric has been emphasized in the findings. And we think this is really important because they also need a chance for employment, and there are jobs that can be done by people without a matric. Then the revolving door syndrome, like avoiding the notion of people circulating in learnerships or jumping from one jobs fund project to the other. This can be avoided if there is a joint update system for all government initiatives, where people can immediately be picked up if they are enrolling for a learnership for the second or third time, and then they can be properly referred the right support systems. Then attrition was high for SFW respondents. And this was usually with people who were not employed, so they were not invested in external evaluators. Whereas we believe that if the projects themselves continually collect tracer data, they can have data for more beneficiaries over a longer period. I think beneficiaries are more likely to stay in touch with the project implementer, and they can know where they are. So we think tracer study should be part of government-driven employment projects. Final slide, please. So I talked earlier about people who ended up in these opportunities, the SFW projects, when that's not what they really wanted. So we think target beneficiary selection to promote both transformation and correct employer-employee match is important. And this can be done by a needs analysis at the beginning of a project, just to find out if people are at the right place. And if not, they can be directed. And then the cost of looking for employment is very high. I mean, when we were doing our analysis, we found out a study which showed that looking for a job costs on average 1,300 Rand a month. And this is for people who actually don't have the money. Even if they had the money, because they are looking for work, that money could be better directed for something else. So we think that initiatives that support employment seeking, for example, the zero rating of websites, should be expanded. And in addition, other services like free access to public sector transport should be provided, or internet access at public libraries where people can do job searching and printing of their CVs and stuff. They can be promoted. So thank you very much for listening to our findings. We hope you have been enlightened. I hand back to the jobs.
Thank you very much, Daniel, Monica, and Natalie. Apologies, colleagues. We are going to do a quick poll on some of the findings that have been stated, colleagues. Remember, we're not losing Menti this time, so no need to figure out the polls, which is on the same platform that you are on. You'll be able to scroll through the different options. Please do vote and select what are some of the recommendations that have been raised. Please do note, colleagues, you can scroll down for more options for each question. Continue also to raise some points and questions in the comment section. Rato has also posted a link where the reports will be available, and the presentation will also be shared. Monica and Daniel, you have left us with so much to ponder on. We'll reflect on some of these questions, colleagues, and thoughts at the end of the next reflection from one of our partners. Then we do the poll. "52% of people are voting for a national database." I think Najwa did mention that we do have one with the pathway manager as part of the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative. And as it grows, there'll be a lot of findings that also are drawn from that. Thank you very much, colleagues. We will come back on reflect on these findings and these comments that are raised. I'd like to call on the CEO of Capacity, who will reflect on, and Capacity is one of the projects that was looked at in the study as well. So Fiona is on. Fiona, are you there? Fiona will come in and give her reflections as well in terms of how they've made sense of some of the findings and what are some of these interesting pointers and recommendations that have been raised by by Monica and Daniel, and how do you make sense of them within a specific project? Fiona, are you ready?
Thank you, I'm ready.
Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. Lovely to be here, and thank you to the Jobs Fund for inviting me, and thank you to everybody who's taking part in such an important conversation. It's great to see everybody on the call and see all the really valuable questions that are being asked. Next slide, please. Excellent. So just a very quick introduction to who Capacity is. We are a digital career accelerator. We've been in operation for over 15 years now. And we're part of City, which is the Cape Innovation and Technology Initiative, born in Cape Town, but now operating across sub-Saharan Africa. And they've been working in the digital economy for the last 22 years. So we've got quite a lot of knowledge and experience about what it takes to get young, unemployed people from where they are and into the world of work, particularly in line with opportunities in the digital economy. And our aim really is to create what we call a pathway or a development opportunity for young people to bridge them into becoming fully fledged digital citizens. And we do that through various innovations and application-based learning and through a number of partnerships, one of which has been a very important partnership with the Jobs Fund, but also with the likes of Mixita, and a range of vendor suppliers, and a range of different approved and valuable partners within the corporate and non-corporate sector in South Africa. Next slide, please. So when I was asked to talk and reflect on the Tracer study and to reflect on our experience of working with young people in South Africa and bridging them into the world of work, the first image that came to mind is the one on the left-hand side, which I'm sure many of you will recognize, and that is the queue to get up to the top of Mount Everest. And the reason I included this picture is for two things. Firstly, I think this problem of youth unemployment in this country is an ever-growing one, and the more we get people to the top of Everest, because it is a massive climb and a hike for our young people to actually achieve where they want to go, what we need to remember is there is a swell of people coming up behind them. And we cannot stop thinking about what we're doing in this space and where we're going in this space and what it takes to transition young people out of unemployment and into the world of work. So when I'm quite a visual person, and when I think about these things, I have this picture of Everest and everybody coming up behind, and then I think about the world of work being on an entirely different mountaintop. And our role, I firmly believe, from a capacity perspective, but also from everybody who's on this call, is to build that bridge or that pathway from one to the other, so that we can actually take people's hands and move them out of unemployment and into work. And the things that we've learned in doing that very clearly is that there is a demand and supply mismatch. There's a lot of conversation about a demand in the marketplace, but that is not always correlating with the supply that we have. We also know, and we've seen through the study findings that we've just heard, that multiple youth bounce through multiple opportunities. If they're not thinking clearly about where they want to go, if there's no lack of clarity on the career pathways and the direction that they might want to go into, they may bounce through a number of learnerships before they end up in an opportunity. I think that there's a lack of access to quality and sustained opportunity for young people in general, but opportunity means understanding what it is. You know, what if I do this opportunity, if I get into this program, if I do this learnership, where will that take me? And how does that sequentially build my career? And then there's that point about training opportunities are not always correlated with the skills deficit. So we have quite a number of legacy or old-fashioned training learnerships and programs that don't necessarily correlate with a marketplace, certainly in my world, in the IT skills sector, that is moving and changing rapidly and you know, reinventing itself almost every 6 months, I'd say, you know, not even a year, you know, but that marketplace is moving, it's agile, it's changing, demand changes, business need changes. And those training opportunities that often exist in the marketplace aren't always connected to that sustained opportunity. Next slide. So what happened to us? Where did we start? And I will air our experience here and the things that went wrong, because I always believe that you've got to almost trip up before you actually work out what you really need to do. And we started very much with thinking about a supply-driven pipeline. So we had done a lot of work with partners in the marketplace, a lot of surveys, a lot of understanding of the narrative around skills mismatched in the IT sector. Even now, as you know, it's grown even more. There's a lot of press around the fact that people need digital skills, and there's particular IT skills such as software development, coding, software testing, data science, data analytics, etc., of where we hear a lot of stories, narrative, and shouting from the marketplace that there aren't enough people. And we worked with, at the time, a training provider. We didn't do the training ourselves. We worked with a training provider that said, absolutely, within the time period that we're looking at, we can train these young people in a short time period. And do you know what? Everybody's going to snap your hand off because everybody wants these type of skills. So we started with a high-scale recruitment, very limited upfront selection, because we were looking at, are they meeting minimum criteria? And therefore, could they attend the generic program and run through that and become available for the hiring marketplace? We had a lot of information from the industry, but limited industry engagement in the training direction. And there was a range of different accreditations that were offered, but they weren't necessarily connected with the endpoint. So what we happily did is we ran through a training program initially, and we thought, wow, we're so smart, we've got it all right. And we hit a blocker at the end of it when the uptake of the youth was very, very low. And luckily, we're quite an agile and learning organization, so we had to sit back and say, crikey, how did we get that wrong? And what we've done is we've created a much more demand-driven pipeline now. So what we do now is we start up front with the industry engagement, and that's not just people saying, yes, here's our scarce skills, here's our vacancies, here's the need. What we're actually really doing is picking down into that and saying, what does good look like? What specifically do you need? What is the proxies for talent that you're looking at in your organization? What are the competencies and competence that you're going to need to make somebody successful in the workplace? And we feed that from the end point, from the job or what good looks like, right through into that whole selection and recruitment process. So we are selecting for not only aptitude and ability, but also for opportunity for success. And we're looking at those proxies for talent and defining them into selection tools so that we make sure that the young people we do give the opportunity to are going to succeed in it. We also align all of the training with internationally recognized certification, and we do a lot of partner feedback and adjustment throughout that training process and the development training process, so that when we get to the end points, the hire is a given point. And I've put 98%. In some of our programs, we're actually reaching 100% hiring in permanent jobs at the end of the training program because we're getting it so well. But it takes a big combined effort with the partner to get that demand-driven pipeline correct and successful. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of what we've done differently, I've spoken a little bit about that demand-driven pipeline, but what we've really learned is that it takes a lot of time and resource investment to get this right. You cannot rush into something. You cannot sort of decide that we're going to do something broad-based and highly generic for a highly specific outcome. And the other thing that we've learned, it's quite interesting looking at the cost comparisons. The other thing we've learned is actually it is not a cheap intervention. You cannot do a quick 2-week, 3-week, 1 month, 2 month training intervention to take young people from where they are in the point of their personal journey to what a corporate organization wants in order to hire them into a technical or a digital job. And we're finding that there's a lot of both professional development gaps, but also personal development gaps and personal challenges that our young people bring into our environments. And when I talk about the high cost, it's because we really need to invest in that transition, the behavioral change, the transition of the individual, the development of professional skills, the development not only of a technical skill, but also of work readiness and work behaviors that will be acceptable to what corporate South Africa is looking for in the jobs that they're creating. So when we look at translating that into a development pipeline or a way of training and investing in young people, we absolutely know that we have to establish those partnerships upfront. We have to combine that classroom-based training with workplace learning. It is essential that young people get to practice within an incubated and safe environment the work skills that are going to be asked of them. The third thing we know is that we absolutely need to use capable teachers who have industry experience. We cannot recreate the world of work in a learning environment without using people that have experienced the world of work and have been at the forefront of delivering the tasks that we're going to ask our young people to learn. And it's really essential that we bring that experience into the learning environment and translate it into actual tasks. And then the fourth thing that we've added to our courses is certification that's relevant, modular, and widely recognized. Again, I'm a great supporter of the work that we do through MITSETA, but what we're also trying to do is give a relevant certification such as Salesforce or AWS or Microsoft or a Google certification or something that is recognized and accepted by the target audience as a marker for ability and skill. And that then adds just something to the portfolio of the young person that you're working with and adds to their chance of success. So what's the outcome of this? What is the culmination of developing sustainable results? We really find that if we do this correctly, we will add long-term economic value to what we do. We absolutely will reduce the bounce rate of young people ending up in a job that is not quite right for them or a learning intervention that's not right, something else that we need to then move on to or somewhere else that we need to go on to. So we try to reduce that and condense the learning experience for the person in the right direction that they want to do. We absolutely need to target quality jobs that are sustainable, that are not going to disappear within 6 months of the young person going into them. We absolutely need to make sure that we're doing application-based learning and providing the environment for young people to practice those skills before they're asked to deliver them in the world of work. And then finally, we really need to understand what the job is that the young people are going to be ending up in at the end of the whole development process and making sure that we back engineer that into the learning pathway. And so that we can then make sure that the results are there, that our young people actually end up in a sustainable job and that we really do change futures. That's me. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much, Fiona. I mean, that is quite a mouthful. Colleagues, we are almost at the very end, but there was just 2 questions that I would like for Fiona and Monica to just wrap up for us, and then I'm going to ask Nacho to do a final closing. 2 questions to both you, Fiona and Monica. You speak about understand how the jobs are meant to be and design backwards. Knowing all of this, and it goes to you as well, Monica, why do we then insist on having, for instance, a metric as a requirement for entry-level jobs when we know that a young person can get in, to get the required skills, and then be placed into a job? And secondly, what is the value between a generic versus a specialized intervention? Thank you.
Okay, I'm happy to start with the first question. I think, in my opinion, it's going to take a long time for us to change the historical proxies for talent and measurements of what equals success in the world of work. If we think about it from an HR background, and that very much is my background, you know, we think we're very smart. We spend a long time creating selection methodologies that will exclude people from our selection criteria, or our pool, I suppose, so that actually at the end of the line, we only have a very small amount of people to interview, and therefore it makes our life easier. We can't necessarily interview everybody who's applied. And so these measurements like matric or like a certain certification or a certain qualification are ones that often the HR, the world is quite comfortable with, because it actually makes their job a little bit easier in terms of selection. So what we've got to do when I talk about changing the proxy for talent, we've really got to work with the employers and actually help them understand that they're just a proxy. They're just a sort of a comfort point. And actually what we've then got to do is say, actually, but perhaps we can unpick what it is that you're looking for. So if you need someone with a degree, what is that degree representing for you? And is there an alternative way for us to represent that? I think we're a long way from removing matric at the moment, because in the long run, we've got to prove employability. And, you know, we've got to tackle some barriers, but we can't fight them all at the same time.
Thank you, Fiona. Monica, what's your take on those two questions?
Thanks. So I actually agree with Fiona that it becomes a proxy that people go to when they advertise jobs. And in my experiences working in other African countries, I think it's also about supply. Like the more there are educated people in an economy, the more the more stringent the requirements become. When I was in Uganda one year, I saw a job being advertised for a cleaner, and the basic requirement was a degree for a cleaner. Because I mean, in Uganda, a degree is almost like a basic qualification. Everyone aspires to get a degree. So it excludes a lot of people. And I think it also reduces the number of applicants when you set the bar so high, even though you don't actually need that requirement. In relation to generic and what word did you use more? Generic and?
Interventions.
Specific. What was, sorry, I didn't hear your question.
Generic versus specialized interventions.
Did you ask whether there's a place for each of those?
Yes, the value.
Yes, so absolutely there's value in either of them. Specific interventions targeting people who are already on a pathway but need that extra something to boost their employment prospects. We talked about the capacity project, which focuses on ICT graduates. So they have the degree, but they cannot find employment. And as Fiona took us through their model, the fact that they need employment places, they need facilitation to get there if they don't have the social capital to access those places. So it's important for them. And then you have people who are not yet quite decided in terms of their qualifications, the proxies, about what they want to do. And then the generic programs help to guide them and give them direction and open up the different pathways. And also it's about guiding, because young people don't have the resources to access opportunities.
Thank you very much, Monica.
Yeah. I was just going to add to that from a generic and specific. I think from the capacity model, because we were targeting specific jobs in a specific industry, the more specific you are with the training, the more you correlate with the endpoint. But it certainly doesn't take away from the fact that actually there are horses for courses and various things that we do. And you know, in the current capacity model, we have a whole range of very generic courses which help people on a pathway, and then at the other end of the scale, very specific courses that are linked to a scarce skill in the marketplace. So I think it really depends on the outcome and the requirement.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Fiona. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Natalie, and the entire JET team. Much appreciated. I'm going to ask the head of the fund to come and do a closing. Just ahead of Naja Lerato, kindly do post the evaluation link. Colleagues, may we kindly ask that you do give us your feedback about this session, and thank you very much. Naja, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mo. Yes, please tell us if we were fraught or what we can do to improve. But from my perspective, I thoroughly enjoyed this. So thank you to the JET team for the hard work. It's always a challenge when you are doing longitudinal studies. The nightmares we had about the drop-off rate of participants, the validity of the results, but we kind of all stayed the course. And so thank you very much for that. And thank you, Fiona. I mean, such a, so succinct in the way in which you presented the information, the challenges that you've had, the demonstrating the importance of agility in your program design. So totally amazing stuff. Thank you, Mo, and thank you to my team for making this a reality today. I mean, some of the key things we take out and what I've heard, Natalie started out by telling us about that context matters. We also heard that it is important to listen to what participants are actually looking for, and that there's potential to then misspend funds because people are participating simply because it's something to do. And of course, that ties back to what our JET team was telling us about the importance of selection in your programs. We also, of course, hear that there continues to be a male bias towards employment, but that if you were a participant in one of these programs, that you were more likely to be employed, which of course talks to the importance of the design of the programs, what they had to offer, and the result around creating a higher level of stickiness for young people and others who have gone through the program, and the ability to then have employment later. I think what I also heard really loud and clear here, and Fiona also emphasized this point, is the importance of proxies. The proxies, and Monica also commented on the proxies that employers use to determine competence and talent. And as role players in this space, it's so important for us to engage employers and to talk about the validity or the appropriateness of the kind of proxies that they are using. And that, of course, again, re-emphasizes the point made by Fiona at the end around demand-led interventions. Too often, we are funded because we are going to be rolling out a particular intervention, and we don't actually determine where is the demand coming from and who specifically those people are, and using our agencies as organizations to approach those organizations where the demand might be and ensure that they either provide input into the content of the bridging program, and that they actually make known what their opportunities are. And that is why it's so great that we have this platform called sayouth.mobi, where we're actively going out, promoting the platform, telling people where the opportunities are. And of course, the participants have spoken about the importance of connectedness in this ecosystem. And so I'm really pleased about Crystal reaching out to Ursula, trying to connect here. And, like we ask for a common database, that might be a difficult one, but what we certainly can work towards is trying to ensure that there is interoperability and sharing of information across people who participate in this particular ecosystem. So on that note, I want to say thank you very much for all the participants, for the questions, for making this a rich engagement, and I wish you a gentle and blessed day further. Thank you.